Okay, let's bring Eric Tulsky aboard. He is the architect, one of the three architects of this massive trade. He's the general manager of the Carolina Hurricanes. Eric Tulsky joins me now on the sheet. Eric, how are you today? Have you stopped smiling? I'm guessing everyone saw your upper teeth over the weekend.
Yeah, it's been a busy week. Trying to catch up now on everything else.
What I was just saying to Zach a couple of seconds ago, Eric. I wonder what the feeling is like when you can go to your head coach Rod Brindamore and hand him a pair of keys and say, "Here's a Ferrari you get to drive now." I'm curious, how much were you in conversation with Rod Brindamore through all of this? And I do want to ask you about Tom Dundon as well. But how much were you in concert with the coach on this one?
Yeah, I mean, Rod and I work very closely. It's essential that I understand what he's looking for, what he thinks the team needs, so that I can go try and bring it for him. Um, he really thought very highly of the players we were sending out. So
Mm-hmm.
it was, it's not like he was super excited to get rid of them, but of course he's excited to bring in the players that we brought in.
I was mentioning before you came on that podcast in the summer, and the one quote in the Expected by Whom podcast where you talked about, and I'm going to paraphrase and probably Eric butcher this, but something along the lines of, are you just trying to fill spaces or are you trying to make your team better? I mean, you let a lot of high price players go. Whether it's Pesci, whether it's Teravainen, whether it's Shea, whether it's Nason, and we can go on and on. How much of, because I think we're all trying to get a feel of, okay, how is Eric Tulsky going to drive this thing? Like, what's his style going to be? What should we read into this and try to learn about Eric Tulsky? Were you giving us a peek into something when you said that? As far as your management style, how you look at things like trades or the salary cap and roster construction, how much of that one quote was a peek into the hockey brain of Eric Tulsky?
Yeah, I mean, I think we try really hard not to be dogmatic about anything. There is no one right way to do it. There is no single one piece that we need. Every single situation is evaluated individually. And the question is, will this get us closer to where we want to be on every decision we make?
Hmm. Was was Rantanen someone that you had? I know managers talk all the time and various names get brought up. Was that someone that you identified and thought, perhaps Colorado is going to have an issue here re-signing him? Maybe he wiggles free, or was that something that you were approached with?
Um, no, I don't know. This dates back to the summer when I talked to 31 teams about what trades we might do. And so, I forget whether I made the first call or they did, but at that
Mm-hmm.
time it was just what do we have on the table? It wasn't really a serious, like, this is going to happen kind of conversation.
Right.
Um, but, we made a list of teams that had pieces that they were willing to put in play potentially that we were interested in and kept circling back to those teams to see where they stood and where we stood. And at some point, maybe it gets serious or maybe it doesn't. I think if you had asked me in June whether I thought that was likely to be the outcome, I would have said no. These
Mm-hmm.
sorts of things usually don't happen. You put a lot of work into every one of these trades, and 99 of them, 99 out of 100 times, that work is just wasted effort that went nowhere. But the one time that does work, you hope it makes it all pay off.
How many? That leads me to a lot of interesting questions. I think. How many, in your mind, trades do you have sort of juggling at the same time? Like I think a lot of fans would be curious. Would you be able to right now pull the trigger on something if you said, Jeff, I got to go, I got to take this call? Could you pull the trigger on something right now? Like how many balls in the air do you normally have?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think we have a second thing that is that close to completion right now. But, as we were getting close to making a decision on that, we had a few things we were looking at, and we needed to get to where everybody understood what each side's sort of final offer was, so that everybody could
Mm.
make a decision about which way they wanted to go.
When you when it became obvious that this was going to be more than just a casual conversation with Colorado. First of all, when did it start to go from warm to hot? And what was the final piece? Like, was there one thing that this deal wasn't going to get done unless X happened? When did it really get hot, and what was the final touch on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I would say in the last couple of weeks is when it got especially serious. I think the final touch was really everybody being ready to switch from conversations about what it might look like to actually pulling the trigger.
Mm-hmm.
And there were some pieces involved in the deal that started to have some time pressure. And so that was ultimately the impetus. It was a complicated deal where we were looking at multiple things. Colorado was looking at multiple things. Chicago was looking at multiple things. And so if any one of those has a deadline, then
Yeah.
everybody else needs to figure out what they want to do.
Um, was there at any point, because I'm always curious about the broker in all of this, like one of the things that I'm starting to learn right now, and we're seeing it with a couple of other teams, is for teams that are eyes set on the Stanley Cup, and that's your team, and that's Colorado certainly, it's hard to do a deal. With two teams who have eyes on 2025, you kind of sometimes need someone who's looking at 2026 instead of just 2025. So I'm curious about the broker here. Was it always this combination of teams that were going to make this that would make this deal?
No, I mean, over the course of months, I've talked to a lot of teams about how they could sort of help broker a deal, thrown ideas at a lot of people. The Chicago idea came together because we were also interested in Taylor,
Mm-hmm.
and I think there was an assumption that that trade would come with them retaining on him, and his salary, the actual cash, is about the same on him as it is on Mikko. And so it's not that different for them, but obviously better for us if we get the cap retention. And so it was possible for us to do a trade where we paid a little bit more than we would to get more cap space while not actually costing them meaningfully more cash.
Was there, or were there rather, any no-fly zones for you in all of this? Like one of the things I think, when I first saw the complete trade, because listen, you hear Mikko Rantanen's name, you're like, okay, how many firsts did Carolina give up? And then you start to think, okay, did they give up Morrow? Did they give up Nikishin? Did they give up Nadeau? And the picks were a second and a fourth. In your mind, in this deal, were there no fly zones like, no, we're not giving up Nadeau, no, we're not giving up a first? Was there anything like that, or was that all negotiable?
I mean, of course, there were players we didn't want to let go, but I think part of what you're describing is a lot of these trades are a team that is sort of out of it, moving on from a UFA before he leaves. It's very different when it's two contenders making a trade. And so
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they wanted a package that was just a bunch of futures. We could have thrown 11 first round picks at them, and I think they would have said no, because that doesn't help them win a cup this year.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is unusual that we were putting in really good players who might help them win a cup. Um, but then once you do that, you're not also getting premium futures, right? So that's the trade-off that came in this case because it was not the usual deal of a buyer and a seller. It was a deal with two buyers exchanging valuable
Mm-hmm.
players.
I want to ask you about Tom Dundon. I asked you about, working closely with Rod Brindamore. And this is, I want to make sure that people understand this. Once upon a time, the general manager worked with complete autonomy. Those days are gone. Once upon a time, you saw your owner at the beginning of the season, maybe at Christmas, and then at the end of the year, and that was it. It's different now. This is a multi-billion-dollar business. And the one thing that I think I understand about Tom Dundon, one, he has a value on everything, and two, he's not shy about going big game hunting. And this is obviously a whopper of a deal. But Tom Dundon and the Carolina Hurricanes have, to varying degrees, always sort of been in and around deals when there are big name players available. Can you share any of your conversations with your owner around the Rantanen deal?
Yeah, I mean, so Tom's perspective is always that he wants us to be active. We want to be part of every conversation and make sure we don't miss a chance to make the team better. And it doesn't matter whether it's a small deal or a big deal. He wants to think about, is this something that would help us? Um, and part of what is freeing is it's not just that he wants to be having conversations, it's that he wants to really think about on everyone, should we do this? And he understands if we make 5 trades with a good thought process, a good outcome might be that 3 work out and 2 don't. And in many places, you'd be worried that you're going to get fired because of the 2 that didn't work. But
Hmm.
here I have an owner who understands that, in fact, we will be ahead because more worked than didn't. And so that is freeing. It allows us to take some risks that you wouldn't always be able to take because as long as he's comfortable with the thought process, he understands it won't always work out. And if the risk is balanced by the right amount of upside, we'll go ahead and take the shot.
Have you already had the conversation with your owner about extending Mikko Rantanen?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about an extension from the beginning, right? It's part of the risk in this trade is we don't have an extension done yet. So we we have to price in the possibility of doing it, the likely price it would be, the likelihood that we think we can get it done. Obviously, if we get an extension done at a low price, this will be an incredible outcome for us. If we
Hmm.
don't get an extension at all, it'll be a little disappointing. Hopefully, we felt like we weighed all the risks and understood where the situation was and felt like we were in a good position to take the chance and press and work on getting this deal done.
At what point do you go to the player and his representation and say, "We're interested, are you?" Or is that already just baked into the pie?
Yeah, I mean, so that's part of the conversation we've had already. And we're comfortable uh, that the situation we have to offer should be compelling, and we have the cap space to get a reasonable deal done. Um, if the player just wants to go to free agency, then so be it, right? That's a risk we're prepared to take. I don't expect that's where we're going to be. I hope that's not where we'll be.
Hmm.
But that's the work we have to get to now is we got the trade done. Now we have to start working on the extension.
It's interesting. Speaking of the extension in the cap space, as a lot of players went elsewhere, as I mentioned off the top of the interview here, I see all this coming together now, and I'm wondering how far down the road in your mind. And I know things can always change and different situations arise, but when it comes to planning, like you don't strike me as the kind of person that's just, you know what, let's get through this year, clean up our cap in the summer, and then go back at it next season. Like you strike me as someone who's looking, and this trade really brought that into focus for me because all of a sudden next season with all of this cap space, you're uniquely qualified to pay Mikko Rantanen a very, very healthy sum. How much in your mind are you looking down the road with this team?
Yeah, I mean, we do try to look ahead as much as we can. We've been managing our cap pretty carefully to make it so that we could get this deal done when the time came, if it came, not that we knew it would, but you want to have the flexibility to take advantage of whatever might come along. You never want to be constrained in a way that makes you miss a chance.
Yeah.
And part of what we understood is that we have the cap space to get a reasonable deal done. If this did end up happening, um, we've sort of thought through what our roster could look like next year, and I think we're pretty comfortable with a couple different scenarios. We'll see how it plays out.
When do you judge a trade? Like I look at this one and I say, you know what, I'm not gonna judge Colorado's end of things until I see, you know, March 7th, 3 o'clock Eastern, what this team looks like because they've now freed up some cap space as well. Like, at what point do you look at a deal and say, okay, now I'm prepared to judge it?
Yeah, I mean, it depends what you mean by judge it, right? If you're evaluating the decisions that each side made, you really have to do that with the information they had at the time. So we gave up a 4th round pick in that deal. If that 4th round pick
Mm.
becomes another Mikko Rantanen, that doesn't mean we made a bad deal. It means, their draft pick worked out and good for them. Um, ultimately both sides made a decision based on the information they had, and that's how you evaluate it right now. Now, of course, 5 years later, you can look back and say, did it work out or not? That's a different question, right? You're not really judging the decision people made, you're judging whether it panned out. And that's also an interesting question, but it's not the one that I would use to evaluate the decision you made.
How much did your players know that you were in the market for something this big? I know players always assume that managers, especially teams that are going for the Stanley Cup, always assume that the manager is in market and looking to do something. Would any of these players have known specifically? I mean, I wonder about Sebastian Aho for the obvious reasons. Know that maybe you were going big game hunting there in Denver?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think so. We kept this pretty tightly held, out of respect for them, frankly. Like
Mm-hmm.
they did not want their player's name hitting the media until we were doing a deal. And I can understand that. And so we kept things pretty quiet and tried to make sure there was no risk of creating a media circus for them. Um, I think our players know we're always going to be looking to try to get better. That doesn't always mean there's something like this in the works, though.
The other thing that I'm curious about too, what have your players said to you about this? Like I would imagine you're Seth Jarvis or you're Brent Burns or whatever, and all of a sudden like, wait a minute, did our GM just get Mikko Rantanen? What did you hear from your players right away?
Yeah, I mean, I've only talked to a couple of them so far, and I think they're excited to have the players that we have come in. I think they're also, always a little bit disappointed to see their close friends and teammates go out. And that's, everybody in the end understands that's part of life in this business. They want to see us keep trying to get better.
Mm-hmm.
But it's always bittersweet, right? You can be excited about the new guy and also sad to lose the old guy at the same time.
For sure. In your mind and perhaps in Rod's mind as well, Mikko Rantanen, we've seen him play center before. Is he a center or is he a winger? Can he be both?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's going to be up to Rod to decide how he wants to set up his lineup. I think Mikko's mostly played on the wing, and that's probably the most likely outcome. But
Mm-hmm.
certainly, he has taken a lot of faceoffs in his time and occasionally played center. And if that's, if our lineup ends up set where that's where Rod sees him, then that's where he'll play.
At what point did you stop allowing yourself to enjoy that moment and move on to getting back to work?
Um, I mean, I think the work has been pretty much nonstop. So, um, there's a lot to do, right? And you finish the trade, and now there's logistics for making connections to people, getting people in, getting, players ready to play. And then it's on to what's our next move and what else can we do? How can we keep getting better?
Mm-hmm. Let me ask about the Taylor Hall piece here. I only have a couple more for you, but I do want to ask about Taylor Hall, who's had one of the most unique, for a first overall pick, has had one of the most unique careers that we've seen in the NHL. And right in the middle of it, there's a bam, Hart Trophy. How long have you had your eyes on Taylor Hall? Your thoughts on him, the player? I know it's been a couple of tough seasons. I know it's been punctuated by injuries, but what made Taylor Hall attractive to you in this?
Yeah, I mean, we've been looking at him for a while. He's a very skilled player who also brings size and speed. We like to play a forechecking game, and he has the ability to get in and pressure and win pucks along the walls and the vision to make plays from there. He has the speed to back the D off when he has the puck. Um, there's just a lot of things about his game that fit the way we play and provide sort of that upgrade of both skill and size that we've been looking to bring into our top nine.
Let me end on this one because this is, I mentioned this off the top of the show. This is your essentially rookie season as general manager. And I think everyone's trying to get a feel for how Eric Tulsky does business. And every move that you do is another piece of that puzzle for hockey fans to get to know Eric Tulsky. What do you think hockey fans, whether it's Carolina or the other 31 markets, what should hockey fans know about you as a general manager?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, like I said, we're not trying to be dogmatic. I don't think there's any one thing we're looking for. I think we are in every case open to ideas and thinking about it individually. And if there is a deal that we don't do, it's because either we didn't see the fit or we thought the price was too high. We're
Mm-hmm.
always prepared to move on to the next one. We never feel beholden that this is the deal we have to do. But when we see a deal that we think makes sense for us, we're not going to be afraid to go ahead and get it done.
I know you won't say who it was, but did you feel like you were close anywhere else in the last little while?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly had a couple things on the table that we had to give pretty serious consideration to. This was the one that ended up making the most sense for us.
Sell us, last one for you. What's the pitch to Rantanen going to sound like to extend?
Yeah, I mean, I still need to get to know him before I know exactly what the pitch should look like. You know, I think we have a really strong team. We have a coach that people like playing for. We have a really good locker room. We have a place that's a great place to live. So all of those I think are compelling pieces. Ultimately, I need to get to know him and understand what it is that drives him so that I can make sure that, that's part of what we're offering him and making a pitch that will sound compelling to him.
That's wonderful. Listen, thanks so much. I know it's a busy time. You're always busy. I really appreciate your time today, Eric. Be well. Congratulations on the deal and handing your coach the keys to a new Ferrari. Looks great on the Hurricanes. We'll talk soon. Thanks so much, Eric.
Yeah, thank you.
If you enjoyed that video, and we certainly hope that you do, please hit the subscribe button right there here at Daily Faceoff. I will put this lineup up against any hockey lineup anywhere. It all gets underway at 9 o'clock Eastern with Morning Cup of Hockey. That is Johnny Lazarus. That is Colby Cohen. Then at noon, it's DFO Live. And then 3 o'clock Eastern, The Sheet. Get caught up on everything in hockey.